morning students. Today we are moving to the part of history. Chapter 6, Towns, Cities and Craft Persons. In this chapter, we are studying about some important temple towns that are in the medieval period and some administrative towns or administrative centers. That means they will be capital of the kings. And pilgrimage centers. Pilgrimage means the people, those who like to visit the place of some important deities or gods. That pilgrimage centers, and commercial towns or port towns. That means for the purpose of trade and commerce, they used mainly one town. So that centers emerged in the medieval period. And some craft centers, the people, those who do the craft work, they are having, they are gathering in one place and they sell or buy the products from there, or the people or those who travelers come from outside, they all met together at that place. Like that, emergence of important towns or cities happened in the medieval period. Those things we are discussing in this chapter, and some important travelers they are also, and important cities like Hampi, Musripatnam and Surat. They were some important cities. Those also we are discussing in this chapter.
There were a variety of towns in the medieval period. For example, there were temple towns which had huge temple and pilgrims visited there throughout the year. Then there were administrative centers from where the administrative work of the kingdom was carried on. For example, taxation, finance, etc. Then there were commercial towns where the buyers and sellers met, and these towns acted as markets. And then there were port towns which were situated near or on the coast, and from where the goods were exported to other countries and imported from other countries. Apart from this, there were towns which combined several functions. For example, a town could be a temple town, administrative center, and port town altogether. Story with Tanjavur, which was the capital of Cholas, an administrative center plus a temple town. So Tanjavur as an administrative center had palaces with mandaps as shown in the image. At these places, kings held their court, that means darbar lagate the king, and they even issued orders to subordinates. Then there were barracks for army where soldiers lived. It also had markets where items like grains, spices, jewelry, etc. were sold. Tanjavur also ensured water supply to the nearby regions. It had Salaya weavers. Weavers are those people who weave cloth. They produced cloth for flags, for kings, nobles, and for masses. And then there were sculptors or sthapatis or murtikar at Swami Malai. And they produced bronze idols as shown in the image. And they produced tall ornamental bell metal lamps. This metal which is shown in the image is also called as bell metal. It's called a bell metal because when you hit it, it produces a sound like a bell.
We can look bronze bell metal, how they are making, or the technique of making this metal. Bronze is an alloy containing copper and tin. Bell metal contains a greater proportion of tin than other kind of bronze. This produces a bell-like sound. We can look how they are making this bronze metal. First, an image was made of wax. This was covered with clay and allowed to dry. Next, it was heated and a tiny hole was made in the clay cover. The molten wax was drained out through this hole. Then molten metal was poured into the clay mold through the hole. Once the metal cooled and solidified, the clay cover was carefully removed and the image was cleaned and polished.
During this period, a number of medieval Indian cities emerged. They are Delhi, Kannauj, Ajmer, etc. under the Rajputs, Badami and Ellora under the Pallavas, and Agra and Fatehpur Sikri under the Mughals. Nobles, officials, royal attendants, scholars and artists settled in these cities to serve the rulers. Their needs created a demand for goods such as silk, fine ornaments, and decorative items. Large number of masons and sculptors were employed to build public places and monuments. All this led to rapid urbanization at these places. Pilgrimage centers In the medieval period, many pilgrimage centers emerged. People believed that visiting these pilgrimage centers washed away all their sins. There were different pilgrimage centers for Hindus and Muslims. The temple authorities often received land grants in which they could collect taxes. They also received huge donations from devotees. Thus, temples like Somnath became storehouses of wealth. This wealth was used for performing elaborate rituals, organizing fairs and festivals. Large number of merchants, craftsmen, and other professionals settled in these areas around the temples. They catered to the needs of local residents and of visiting pilgrims. Since ancient times, towns developed at places of pilgrimage such as Prayag, Allahabad, Kashi, Varanasi, Vrindavan near Mathura, and Pushkar near Ajmer. Settlements also developed near the shrines of Sufi saints. For example, in Ajmer, settlements grew around the Dargah of Saint Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti. The town of Amritsar developed around the Sikh shrine Harmandir Sahib. The Hindus had 4 important religious sites, namely Kedarnath, Badrinath, Gangotri, and Yamunotri.
We can look at what are the taxes on markets. The following is a summary from 10th century inscription from Rajasthan, which lists the dues that were to be collected by temple authorities. There were taxes in kind on sugar and jaggery, dyes, thread and cotton, on coconuts, salt, aracanuts, butter, sesame oil, on clothes. Besides, there were taxes on traders, on those who sold metal goods, on distillates, on oil, on cattle fodder, and on loads of grain. Some of these taxes were collected in kind, while others were collected in cash. That means they were collecting taxes on the as a produce or as in the form of cash.
There was a network of small towns in the Indian subcontinent from 8th century onwards. These towns had a mandapika or mandi where villagers brought their products for selling. Mandi means a market. Then there were fortified palaces which were built by samantas or zamindars, and they even levied taxes on people. Then there were traders who lived in towns and some traveled from one town to the other. Then there was market streets which were called as Haat, as in Delhi Haat, and such market streets were lined with shops as shown in the picture. And then there were streets where artisans, potters, oil pressers and sugar makers sold their products. There were various trading communities that emerged during the medieval period. For example, Banjaras and horse traders traded in horses, then Mani Gramam and Nana Desi, Chetiyars, Marwari, Oswal, Gujarati traders who traded in gold, ivory, spices, tin and Chinese blue pottery, then Arab, Persian, Chinese, Jewish and Syrian Christian traders who traded in spices and cotton, and European traders who also traded in spices and cotton. Various crafts were also famous in the medieval period towns. For example, craftspersons of Bidar were so famous for their inlay work in copper and silver that their craft came to be known as Bidari. Then there were Panchalas or Vishwakarma community which worked as bronzesmiths, blacksmiths, masons and carpenters, and they played an important role in construction of palaces, buildings, etc. Then there were Salayar or Kai Kolas community which worked as weavers and became prosperous and even made donations to temples.
The changing fortunes of towns. Some towns like Ahmedabad in Gujarat went on to become major commercial cities, but others like Tanjavur shrunk in size and importance over the centuries. Murshidabad, West Bengal, on the banks of the Bhagirathi river, which rose to prominence as the center of silks and became the capital of Bengal in 1704. Declined in the course of the century as the weavers faced competition from cheap mill-made cloth from England. Some cities, medieval period, some cities become the important trading centers, and later some other cities become the important trading centers, and it was declined by the importing of foreign goods from England, so that some big cities or important cities become declined also. Dear students, we have seen about some of the important temple towns and administrative centers and pilgrimage centers and commercial towns or port towns or craft centers. The importance of these centers and what are the travelers says about these cities. So read the chapter carefully. The rest of things we will see in the next part.